Those are sort of the four buckets that I keep in my brain when I'm talking with somebody about it or trying to figure out what's going on, assessing those areas and which of those buckets or maybe multiple buckets are playing a role. And then we address some of the issues within that.
Welcome to the Experience Health Podcast. I'm your host, Rachael Vassar, an online holistic health practitioner helping high achievers get to the root of chronic symptoms, gut issues, and fatigue. Today, we're going to be talking about what actually restores your energy and regulates your nervous system using evidence-based approaches, not quick fixes. I'm joined by Dr. Blake Myers, a licensed naturopath doctor and assistant professor of integrative and functional nutrition at Saybrook University, who specializes in helping women navigate hormone shifts in midlife through root cause science-informed care. So, without further ado, Dr. Blake Myers, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So diving right in, I want to get started with a few basics with energy and nervous system. So I want to start with, let's say someone comes to you and says, I'm exhausted all the time. Can you tell me what is actually going on with individuals most of the time when they come to you like this physiologically? Physiologically.
Well, that's really broad because, fatigue and decreased energy is a common symptom to a dysfunction in many different types of body systems or different hormonal systems, and can there can be a disease process and it can be related to that as well, but sometimes it's just dysfunction. So really, and in getting a full history in a first visit, it's kind of like being a detective and trying to put together enough of the pieces to synthesize, like, okay, like kind of what does this sound like? Does it sound like hypothyroidism, which would be one, especially in women, in towards midlife, is one of the most common reasons. Hashimoto's thyroiditis is an autoimmune thyroid condition, and it's the most common autoimmune condition and thyroid condition in iodine sufficient countries. So that's a really common cause. It can be related to changes in sex hormones in midlife for women, for sure. It can be related to chronic stress and inflammation and impacting the way that mitochondria work in cells. So there's like enough things that really it's kind of, you have to just try to put the picture together of what kind of labs need to be looked at in the first visit, basically to try to figure out the cause or root causes. A lot of times I'm working with people with chronic illnesses a lot of times. So there's not usually one cause of a chronic illness. If there was, then it would be great because you could just do that one thing, address that one thing, and
That would be
people would get well.
nice.
But it's
Yep.
usually like multi-system kind of dysfunctions and things. There's chronic infections and there's HPA axis dysfunction and different
Oh,
things.
absolutely. Yeah, that's the answer that I like to hear because the human body is extremely complex and just giving one answer is not
Yes.
enough. So,
Yeah.
yeah, you mentioned HPA axis dysfunction. It tends to be like a really
Yeah.
big root cause in
Yeah.
low energy, especially people who are a little bit older. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. The HPA axis stands for hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And so it's the hypothalamus and the pituitary in the brain. So it's basically your brain adrenal connection. And your brain runs the show for all of your hormonal systems. There's a HPO, the ovarian axis. There's a thyroid axis. So anywhere that your body's producing hormones, the brain's running that. And so the system of the HPA axis is controlling everything that your adrenal glands do. Your adrenal glands make hormones of various sorts. They play a role in regulating blood pressure and mineral balance in your body. But one of the things that most people are familiar with is cortisol. And cortisol is one of your primary ways of responding to stress. It's a stress hormone and regulates how we respond to stress, both mental, emotional, and physical. So, most people would think of, I'm emotionally stressed right now, and think of cortisol going up or something, and that can be true. But, you can have an infection when your immune system gets heightened, cortisol will increase, and other types of stressors. So when that system starts to get overtaxed or gets dysfunctional for different reasons, which I can mention what some of those might be in a minute, it will really start to impact stress resiliency. It will start to impact sleep, blood sugar regulation, ability to gain or lose weight. It will cause if there's a lot of elevated cortisol, issues, then it'll cause a fat redistribution and cause more visceral abdominal fat. Some of the reasons that this system can commonly get imbalanced could be things like chronic inflammation or chronic infections that are causing a heightened immune response, because cortisol will decrease your body. It's your body's natural response to try to decrease inflammation, but also chronic unmanaged mental emotional stress, also stressors of a lot of blood sugar imbalance. Cortisol, when your blood sugar gets too low, cortisol is supposed to increase because that's what causes your blood sugar to increase because you don't want to get too low. But when there's a lot of up and down in that, there's a lot of stress to the system, and those are just some of the ways that it can get imbalanced, and sleep disruption can definitely cause imbalances in that system. So it's a primary one, and if you start to get kind of what people would call adrenal fatigue, that's not actually a medical term, but basically a decreased sort of response from the
Hmm.
system, then there could be a lot of fatigue for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I see a lot with people, especially like high achievers, is, and this is something that I went through too, is like you go through like a period of time with like super high output, and then eventually you just like can't keep going, and then you just get like this like period of like super chronic fatigue that you have to recover from.
Hmm.
Um, and that is kind of like what people are thinking of with like adrenal fatigue is like the end of that. Your body is pumping out cortisol so much, like through that super intense period of time. And then it's like, wait, I can't keep doing this because if cortisol is high too long, what sort of effects does that have on the body?
Cortisol will, in the long term, it will impact blood sugar regulation, and it will and insulin sensitivity, and you can get immune system uh, suppression issues from it, basically. So people that have kind of dysfunctions in this system, they'll be prone to getting illnesses pretty easily, or like the cold sore outbreaks a lot and that sort of thing. Um, I would say sleep's the biggest one that I think of, really. Like anytime somebody's coming to me with sleep issues, I always think of the HPA axis, because cortisol has what's called a diurnal pattern over a 24-hour period. It's supposed to spike in the morning when you wake up in the first 30 minutes or so. And then it basically slowly tapers down over the day
Hmm.
and until the nighttime when you're supposed to go to sleep. And then it's like low when you're sleeping and then spikes and wakes you up. Um, but sleep can mess up your HPA axis, but if your HPA axis gets kind of dysregulated for other reasons, your sleep can get messed up to where you can have trouble falling asleep and be wired at night. And then your cortisol is actually going down in the morning and you're fatigued and you're tired all day, and you can get like inversions and imbalances in the
Yeah.
pattern. So that's another one of the things that I think of. And that just cascades into all kinds of issues because sleep is foundational.
Oh, absolutely. So that's like when people are like trying to sleep, but they feel tired but wired. That's like the cortisol typically playing a role in that because it's
Yeah.
not dropping enough in order for you to actually get to sleep, even though you're exhausted.
And you can test that, luckily really easily,
Oh, yeah.
um, in urine or saliva. You just multiple times in the day, from the time you wake up, you spit in a tube, and it's a pretty easy test. It's relatively affordable, and it can really help if you're experiencing fatigue and sleep issues.
Absolutely. I find that one to be really helpful for my clients too, since a lot of them tend to struggle with a lot of like energy, sleep, stuff like that. Just like
Hmm.
getting a picture of what their cortisol looks like is really helpful because sometimes it's not always straightforward, like symptom wise. Sometimes it's good to get an actual picture of what their cortisol could look like because it could be like constantly elevated or completely flatlined, or it could be reversed. So it's really good to get that picture of the cortisol because of how much it affects your
Yeah.
body. Um, Let me see here.
It also can mess your gut up. So that's
Oh
another
yeah.
important one. It goes both ways. Your gut can dysregulate your HPA axis, but the other way around, and it can, because of immune changes, it can impact the gut barrier and microbiome and things.
Mm. That's also when a lot of people tend to develop IBS, correct? Because of the gut brain connection.
Yeah, I mean that could be for potentially other reasons outside of the HPA axis, but yes, when there's
Well, maybe not
when
HPA
there's
axis specifically, but like stress
but
and
like this,
cortisol.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And like dysbiosis and leaky gut, or
Yeah.
intestinal permeability, like those things start to impact the talk between the gut and the brain,
Hmm.
um, largely through the vagus nerve, but also due to metabolites from different bacteria. And so, yeah, people can get a hypersensitive enteric nervous system, or the nervous system around their gut. And so they're hypersensitive to, and things are painful that normally shouldn't be painful in the intestines. So that's one of the things that happens.
Mm, interesting. When we're talking about like cortisol, stress, HPA axis dysfunction, what is like the overarching thing that tends to trigger these things?
That tends to trigger, sorry, the imbalance in the system, you mean?
Yes, the dysregulation in your system.
Um, well, I try to keep it in buckets, and I think I sort of mentioned them, that um, there's like the chronic mental emotional stress bucket, there's the sleep disruption bucket, there's the chronic inflammation uh, bucket, which sort of has chronic infections and or heavy metals and different things in it, or anything that sort of contributes to that. And then blood sugar regulation and insulin, uh, decrease insulin sensitivity and things. So those are sort of the four buckets that I keep in my brain when I'm talking with somebody about it, or trying to figure out what's going on, and assessing those areas, and which of those buckets, or maybe multiple buckets, are playing a role. And then we kind of go in and try to address some of the issues within that. So if it's blood sugar regulation, we're talking about a whole foods diet and making sure that they're getting enough fiber, and maybe lower glycemic index foods and things like that, right? But for other people, that might not be the main thing that we need to talk about, and it might need to be to dig into like what's going on from a chronic inflammation picture, and why is that there?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's like quite a few different things that you need to target and figure out what that person needs in order to help improve their health.
Yeah, and I'll say that one of my go-to things and favorite things for if there's dysregulations in the HPA axis is adaptogenic herbs. They're fabulous for that. I've been using them for over 10 years and just seen amazing things with it. So these are herbs. There's mushrooms that are adaptogens too, but as the name implies, they help you adapt. They help you be more adaptable to sort of stressors with the capital S, of all the sorts that I've mentioned. But they don't, by definition, they don't do any one thing in the body. They do multiple things that, when you sum all of it up, in sort of leads to a tonifying or strengthening impact. But they will help balance cortisol um, response, and they will help with inflammation and cellular respiration, in metabolism, and they will help balance the immune system. So they do all these amazing things that sort of all lead back to tonification. So I love using adaptogenic herbs, but and so some of these, most people know ashwagandha, which is great, but there's a lot of other ones, all the ginsengs, rhodiola, Schisandra berry is one of my favorite ones. And I always use a combination of them. I don't usually use just one. I like to use a combination.
Yeah. Adaptogenic herbs are extremely popular. I know like lion's mane
Yeah.
is also an extremely popular one
Yeah.
nowadays. Maybe not in like the HPA axis. That's more of like for like focus and stuff like
Good
that,
for the
which
brain.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, for the brain, which plays a role. But um yeah, I definitely agree there. Adaptogenic herbs can be really, really helpful. Um, I wanted to I wanted to ask, kind of like changing a little bit what we were talking about. I wanted to ask what based on like everything, like all of the people that you've worked with so far, where do you see most people misunderstanding stress, especially when it comes to cortisol?
Misunderstanding stress. Um, well, I think that people tend to underestimate uh, both the impacts that chronic stress can have on the body, and sort of chipping away at resiliency and adaptability, which is what health is all about, essentially, is having a body that's able to adapt to the environment, and the internal environment. People, I don't think, understand how much it chips away at that, but also, I think people underestimate how significant stressors can be in their life. Like, people can be really strong and power through, but that doesn't mean that the stress is not impacting you in a
Yeah.
negative way. So a lot of times it's a conversation about, well, you went through a divorce, or there was a grief, and your job is really stressful, and there's financial troubles, and like you moved, like all of that are significant. You're going through a lot, and sort of normalizing that for people and helping them realize like you are doing a lot and going through a lot, but it you have to put in practices in order to help your body and mind adapt to that, and build some resiliency to that, because that's a lot, and over time it might start to really impact your health, or if they're seeing me, maybe it already is.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. That was actually, again, as I mentioned like earlier in this interview, I mentioned that I went through like a period of like super high stress. I didn't think that stress, like I thought if you just like were resilient or didn't
Yeah,
think that it was hurting you, that it wasn't going to hurt you.
yeah,
Sadly, that's not the truth. I wish it was.
yeah, yeah. Well,
But I
most of the time
definitely
people don't.
agree.
Yeah, most of the time people, I don't think they're not thinking when they go to see the doctor that they're thinking that like I need labs done to see like what vitamins am I deficient in, or
Mm,
what's going on in my thyroid or whatever else. They're not usually thinking that a primary driver might be the amount of stressors that they have, and it might be more of a nervous system rebalancing conversation. It might be like how can you get rid of some can is there anything to
take
mitigate
something
some
off
of
your
the
plate.
stressors? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree there. Nervous system dysregulation definitely plays a huge role for sure.
Mhm.
Um, I would love to, you mentioned implementing strategies to help support and stress management are really important. So I would love to dive into a few practical things that people can do to help in managing stress, because obviously, like from everything that we've talked about so far, between HPA axis dysfunction, stress, cortisol, all of those things, stress and nervous system regulation or dysregulation play a huge role in impacting your health in a negative way, but also in helping you heal. So,
Yeah.
what would you say? We can get into like a few things as we go, but I would love to know like what would you say is one of the most important things beyond like the basics like blood sugar regulation, like
Yeah.
stuff like that. Um, but more so specific to nervous system regulation, stress management that people can implement to help improve their health.
Yeah. Well, the first one I'm going to say is it it sounds overly basic, but it actually is extremely powerful, and that is to rest. Our culture does not put an emphasis on the importance of true rest, and sometimes it's not always accessible. But if that is a primary solution, if your nervous system is always on and it's always having to respond, it has to rest in order to heal. So that's a and rest can mean different things, but I have to have people practicing rest. Like when can you
Mm,
take time in silence and quiet and actually like lay there for 15 minutes and just let your body decompress? There's different practices that are helpful in that. So it could be something like yin yoga for some people, right? I know for me that's a really great thing for my nervous system. Um, but I most of the time in my practice, I will talk to people about a couple of different things. One would be mindfulness meditation, and I'll take people through a guided meditation and sort of teach them the basics of mindfulness. Um, and that's a slow process that builds upon itself over time. And you get to a point over, it might be a couple weeks, it might be a month, it might be a couple months, but if you practice meditation regularly, there will be a day when you start to like, oh, I feel a little bit calmer, and I feel like my orientation to myself and the world is somehow just shifted a little bit. And that little shift and those shifts that continue, those are actually your internal systems changing how you respond to the world, right? The
hmm.
world doesn't have to change, but if something shifts in you and how you orient to it, now those things that were stressful in a certain way aren't stressful in the same way. And that gives now your nervous system is just responding differently. And so there's healing that can happen there. I don't
Mm.
know if you have any experience with anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are definitely things that I implement a lot. I wanted to add a little bit too in like the realm of rest is a lot of people will be like, yeah, I like wind down, scrolling on social media at night or like
Yeah,
watching a show or something like that. And like I think watching a show can have like a time and place. Like obviously it can like help you chill and stuff, but let's just be honest, that's not real
yeah,
rest. Like
it's
if
not.
there's like a break in like whatever like show you're watching or like ads or something like that, what do you do literally immediately? You get on your
Mm,
phone and start scrolling. Like people can't even
yeah,
stand like even a moment of silence, which I think is like one of the biggest drivers of nervous system regulation is just like not being able to like be bored. I think like resting and like being bored can be really helpful in regulating your nervous system. Of course, you can do other things like actually practicing meditation, actually doing like some yoga, or actually like maybe people like to knit or something like that. But I also think that just learning to actually have like sit in silence, this may be more of like a later time for people who are recovering their nervous system, but because sometimes it can be too overwhelming in the beginning. But I do think that something like that is really important for people to regulate their nervous system. What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think you said that really well. And another way to think about it is how, like, what's a stimulus to your nervous system? It's anything that's coming through your senses, right?
Hmm.
Touch, sight, smell, sound, right? All of the senses. And so nervous system rest means not having stimulus to those senses. So like you're saying, it's like that's like one of the ways to think about it, I think, is like um, if you're watching something on TV, that's not rest to your nervous system per se.
No.
Um, and the same if you're, if you're in a super noisy environment or a city type environment, perhaps, so like earplugs and eye pillows, and that sort of thing is like actually helping your nervous system rest. It's not. I think a lot of times people conflate it with sleep. Even it's like, well, sleep's important, but we're not talking about that. You need to sleep more. Maybe you do. Sleep obviously is
Yeah.
important to heal your nervous system, but rest is a different thing. It's turning
Yeah.
off a bit. It's turning off um, all of that stuff coming at you. Um,
Yeah.
another thing I want to mention that's powerful is heart rate variability training.
Mm.
Um, you're familiar with that?
Yes. Yeah. You can dive into it though.
Yeah, it's fabulous. So it's a type of biofeedback. Um, and so let's see how I want to describe this. Okay, so there's actually if you feel your pulse, this is kind of fun. So if you feel your pulse, like right here, and you take a moment once you feel it, and some people will feel this and some won't for different reasons, but if you notice when you breathe in, what you notice, and then breathe out. And maybe take like 4 second breath in, 4 second breath out. Just do that a couple times. Do one more cycle. Okay. Did you notice anything when you did it? Did your pulse change at all? Or did it feel like it
Um,
was the same?
I feel like mine, I feel like I couldn't feel it very well while I
Okay.
was
So
breathing.
yeah,
But
so I reach around this way, but it's right here, but basically. But anyway, you find that
I could feel it, but whenever I would breathe, I couldn't very well.
yeah.
But
Okay, so when there's this phenomenon called respiratory sinus arrhythmia. So respiratory, it's breath, sinus arrhythmia. It's talking about your sinus rhythm of your heart.
hmm.
And arrhythmia, it's like a different rhythm. So this RSA, as it's called, is when you breathe in, your sympathetic nervous system activates. It's the part of your parasympathetic or your autonomic nervous system. And when you
Yes.
breathe out, your parasympathetic nervous system, this is a calming, rest, and digest part, activates. So what's really interesting and beautiful about this is um, if your sympathetic increases when you breathe in and the parasympathetic when you breathe out, you can control your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system, by controlling your breath and the way that you're
Mm.
breathing. So um, this change when the pulse increases breathing in and decreases breathing out, um, the difference in that is called the heart rate variability. It's the variation in your heart rate. And the bigger that is basically a sign of how strong your autonomic nervous system is, uh, how yeah, I would just say how strong it is basically. And it correlates to the bigger that number is, there's a decreased all-cause mortality, there's decreased cardiovascular mortality, it'll help decrease pain, anxiety. There's tons of research on this. People have been researching this since at least the 70s, possibly the 50s. I can't remember that for sure, but at least the 70s. And so what you do, so I sort of explain this to people, and then I teach people how to breathe with their diaphragm. You don't want to breathe up in your chest. You want to breathe in your diaphragm. And ideally, when you breathe, the lower sides of your ribs move. That's kind of step number one. So you practice that. And once you can breathe with your diaphragm, then what you do is you start practicing breathing at 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out. There's a resonant frequency that everybody has. That's kind of the average. And it's basically like when you do that, if you spend 15 to 20 minutes practicing that 5 days a week, it's basically like going to the gym for your autonomic nervous system. Instead of lifting weights and working your muscles out, you're working your nervous system out. And that whole part of your nervous system and building resiliency in that by working it out, that's your stress response, right? That's how you that's kind of one of the main things you're trying to heal through rest and decreasing stressors and all that. So it's a really amazing way to balance your nervous system and
Yeah.
to heal it.
Yeah. I love that. Breath definitely plays a huge role in regulating your nervous system. One of my favorite breathwork techniques is the physiological sigh for like calming the nervous system. So like 4 seconds
Mm.
in. The one introduced by what was his name?
Is
He's
it Wim
very
Hof?
popular. No.
Oh, that's the only person I could think of. I don't know that one.
He's a popular
Oh,
neuroscientist. I just forgot his name. That's weird. But it's like 4 seconds in and like another sharp inhale to fully inflate the lungs, and then it's like 8 seconds out since
okay.
longer out helps activate the nervous system. So
Yeah.
this is different than like heart rate variability training, but I was just like bringing that in for like the nervous system regulation side of things. How like powerful breath work is for regulating your nervous system. And I find that to be an easier entry point for a lot of people in regulating their nervous system because a lot of times when people are like extremely stressed, sometimes trying to meditate can be extremely like triggering or difficult for
Hmm.
them and it like
Yeah.
makes them very uncomfortable. So I find that introducing breath work first is a way more like quicker and easier way to help people in regulating their nervous system. And then, of course, I love like mindful meditation and stuff like that. I just find like for me too, it took me a while to start regulating my nervous system because meditation was the only thing that people were talking about, but I
Hmm.
didn't have time for that. I was very busy. I
Yeah.
could have made time, but whatever.
Yeah.
And it also did not make me feel good at all. It made me super stressed, like trying to do it.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. That's where it's really good to have a guide or someone, because if you can work through that and process through that, like you can get to a different place. But I understand, yeah,
Yeah,
meditation can
I
bring
did
up
get to a
things.
different place with
Yeah,
meditation, but just in the beginning, I needed a little bit more of like a something to help me get down there without like
yeah,
me freaking out about because I did like guided meditations and I kind of wanted to like choke them because it was like stressing me out. I was like, they're talking
yeah.
too slow. I was like, what is
It's
this?
different things for different people. That's really
Yeah,
important, right?
yeah.
But the breath work is like something to do. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it is kind of nice in that way. It's like
Yeah.
it's a practice and something you can do. But yeah,
It's like a
there,
middle ground for those people who can't like do nothing yet to help them get to
yeah.
that point.
And
Is
I
how
like
I see it, but
absolutely, and I like to use nervine herbs as well, to
mm,
help calm people's nervous system. So things like lemon balm, California poppy, passion flower are some of the ones. Milky oats, those things that they can really help, just to sort of calm the nervous system, and seems to have this effect of kind of tonifying or strengthening it over time. So those are just something that I've been using for a long time that I find valuable. Lavender is another kind of anti-anxiety herb that seems to work well to get people down if their nervous system's super heightened so that they can sometimes, like you said, you got to like be able to bring it down to a point where you can start to access healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to I wanted to ask too. Another thing that I've noticed with people, and I want to see your thoughts on this, is sometimes when they start regulating their nervous system, they may be feeling like super calm, super good for like a month, few months, and then suddenly they get like extreme fatigue. And
Mm.
I find this more common with like people who have like ADHD, for example. They get like extreme fatigue and just like difficulty doing anything in the day, if that makes sense.
Mm.
I guess like what are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you've seen?
That's interesting. I don't know if I've seen it in that way. What it makes me think of, though, is during medical school, um, there was this phenomenon where everybody would get sick right after taking a finals, like an exam. They'd get sick and be like wiped out and like totally
That would
fatigued
happen.
and can't function. Yeah, and
That
so
would
many
happen to
people.
me, yeah.
And
At
so
my school.
that's what it makes me think of is like you're wired and you're on. There's a lot of adrenaline, there's a lot of cortisol, you're putting in all you have, and then um it's kind of like the yin yang, like you went so far this way that like your body crashed and had to do this and recover. So that's kind of what it made me think of, but I don't know if I've seen it necessarily clinically other than that.
Something that I was thinking, like when I've seen cases such as this, is like when people start to like downregulate their nervous system, if they've been like in fight or flight or in the sympathetic state for so long and then they start downregulating it, there's probably like quite a few underlying things that the body hasn't like addressed yet or that is like going
Mm.
on that survival mode kind of kept that from coming through like fatigue. If your cortisol is like super high and then you start lowering your cortisol, I feel like the fatigue can definitely come through a lot more, because you're not like constantly go 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 like triggering that cortisol every single day.
Yeah, I also think that um I've always perceived that there's like the body's actually detoxifying cellularly. This is just sort of anecdote, and like what I've
Yeah.
felt like I'm noticing is that uh, as the nervous system calms down and things are kind of balancing and regulating, now the body can function in all of the ways that it wasn't able to function before, basically, because most things kind of get a lot of things just kind of get shut down or don't work
Yep.
right, and so now if the body can start detoxifying, it'll mobilize toxins. You might start losing fat where a lot of toxins are stored. And so
Mm,
I've also kind of wondered if that's a little bit maybe about what's going on, is that like all those things are getting mobilized and they're in your bloodstream and going around. Your
yeah.
body is able to start to get them out now. Um, but that kind of has always made sense to me. So one of
Yeah.
the things I've always tried to support people in opening their detox pathways, like
Mm,
any type of chronic illness or fatigue or whatever, a foundational thing is to make sure that your liver function is working well and you're having regular bowel movements because a lot of toxins are leaving in your stool. And a
absolutely.
lot of times I have people sweating and then replenishing with minerals and things, but just trying to keep the detox pathways open because you're not going to stop all of the toxins that we're all getting all day, every day from the outside, but your body's also producing things that are toxic, has to get rid of, has to detox estrogen and hormones and stuff. So
Yeah.
that's like a foundational thing that's important to keep that dam open, I guess.
Absolutely. I would agree with that for sure. Yeah. Awesome. I want to, let's see here. I think we only have like a couple minutes left. So I want to dive in real quick, to talking about how a lot of people tend to notice their energy just like decreasing more and more after like, let's say like 30 years old, for example.
Mhm.
And of course, doctors are like, yeah, that's just like, or doctors or people are like, oh, that's just a part of aging, blah, blah, blah. What tends to make energy dips or chronic fatigue or low energy more common, um, in older individuals or people in the middle of their life, especially in women?
Yeah, well, there is an aspect of natural aging to many things, right? And one of those might be that, your metabolic rate will tend to slow down, but especially in women in midlife, they're experiencing perimenopause, menopause, and that takes that changes the metabolism greatly. Um, and that is and related to regular aging. So for men too, but in women with regular aging and then the menopausal transition, there's tends to be an more oxidative burden and decreased mitochondrial function. That's the energy produces in your cells. And so, um, if the mitochondria aren't working optimally, then your whole body can start to feel fatigued, but you'll get a lot of brain fog and issues with cognition and things because your brain is one of the most energy using things in your body. So for women, especially though, that's one of the reasons that it's really important to address symptoms of the menopausal transition as that's coming up, because um, your metabolism is going to change during that time of your life because of the hormonal changes. There's no way around that. So trying to take measures to support mitochondrial health are really important during that time. But also, men or women, I would say taking steps to support cellular energy production health is really important.
Absolutely. What are some things that people can do to help support in their mitochondrial health and energy production, especially when they're going, let's say for women specifically, when they're going through perimenopause?
Yeah, so there's some certain nutrients that are really important. And of course, getting your nutrition through your diet is optimal, but I will say that there's many women that are doing everything right during midlife. They're eating great, eating nutrient dense food, um, and they're moving their body and they're doing all the right things basically, and they still can just feel like crap because it's a really significant transition. So supplementation can be super helpful during that time of life, and primarily if we're thinking about supplementation to support mitochondria, um, thinking about B vitamins, so like a B complex, and then thinking about the primary antioxidants that the body uses and that mitochondria use, because um, part of the process of mitochondria making energy, it's an oxidative process. It's called oxidative phosphorylation. So it's oxidative, and therefore, if there's not enough antioxidants to balance that out, it will build up and it will damage the mitochondria that are making the oxidative things. So some of the main things I would think of would be vitamin C and E, both of those together, um, and magnesium and manganese. That's one that most people don't know, but manganese is one of the primary mineral cofactors that your mitochondria needs, and zinc would be another one, and selenium. So I remember this by, well, ACEs and zinc is an easy one. So you can say vitamin A, C, E, selenium, and zinc. ACEs and zinc. So those are really foundational supplemental things. Um, Another one for your mitochondria that could be helpful, and this isn't for everyone, but for some people it's really beneficial, is intermittent fasting. When you So intermittent fasting, the way I do it is not changing how many calories you're eating in a 24-hour period, but it's eating those calories in a shorter window in the day. So most of the time, I would recommend people see if they can work their way up to a 16-8, which is 16 hours without eating, and then eating all of your calories within 8 hours of a day. It needs to be individualized sometimes if people don't feel great doing that. But this concept is helpful because the longer that you're fasting, you support autophagy, which is it's like old cells that aren't functioning well need to die and new cells need to get built. And this fasting window supports that, and it supports new mitochondria getting built, old mitochondria going away, new mitochondria getting built. So that, and then do you want one more? I can give you one
Sure.
more. Um,
Sure.
build muscle. That's one of the best things you can do for all of your body, but especially for healthy aging in many ways. Um,
Especially for women when they're older, osteoporosis.
yeah, that's one of the foundational things for women, is to start building muscle when
Yeah.
you're young if you can. It'll protect your bones, but it'll keep your immune system in balance. It'll help your blood sugar regulation, and it
Yep.
will increase your energy because your muscles have a lot of mitochondria, and it will help you to build more mitochondria basically and have more uh, energy. production in your body as you build muscle. And most women are like a little scared about getting bulky or something like that. I'm like, that's not going to happen. You'll build
If you're
healthy lean.
like, if you're an older woman, I'm like, you don't worry about
You,
that
you'll be
either.
yeah, it's not going to happen. You'll build healthy lean muscle and you'll
Yeah.
feel good and you'll feel more solid in your body and your
Yeah.
mind. But that's not one that a lot of people think about. Women tend to, in my experience, tend to focus on cardio a bit more, and cardio is okay. Um, but if you overdo it, it'll increase your cortisol, which isn't good, as we've
Yeah.
talked about. But
The Orange
shifting
Theory
that a little bit,
classes.
yeah, flip it a little bit and start doing resistance training,
Mm,
a few times a week at least. That's another
yeah.
great one for mitochondria health and healthy aging.
Yeah. Do you typically recommend like HIIT training for individuals to help support mitochondrial health?
Um,
Specific HIIT training, not like Orange Theory or like F45.
I guess I haven't really from thinking of it from that perspective, but I mean, I think hit training can be really nice a couple of times a week, or something because it's efficient. Um, and but I think, as long as people aren't overdoing it, I think it's great. But I
Yeah.
haven't thought about it so much for mitochondria, but I mean, exercise in
There's
general will be helpful.
Absolutely. There is quite a bit of research showing like the positive effects of HIIT training on mitochondrial health. And when I say HIIT training, I'm talking about like specific like high intensity interval training where it's like let's say you do like well, maybe like older women may not be doing this in the beginning, but like sprinting for like 15, 30 seconds and then like 60 seconds off and then you
Yeah,
get like 10 rounds, for example. Again, I'm not talking about like the circuit training stuff.
yeah,
Um I'm not really the biggest fan of those if you haven't noticed. But
yeah,
I think for certain individuals that can be really helpful in getting the heart rate up, getting into like a higher zone of training to help like
yeah,
put a good amount of stress on their body. Just like while I'm talking about this though, if you have like nervous system dysregulation, high stress, like you're kind of in the more beginning stages of healing, don't do HIIT yet, please.
yeah,
It's something that you'd want to implement later. For sure.
yeah. I do think that
But
resistance training though can
yeah,
be helpful early on.
absolutely. For anyone. Awesome. Okay, I think that's everything that we needed to go through. I think that's given people quite a few applicable things to implement, which is awesome. So let me see. I think something that I want to end with is if someone feels stuck and they feel like they have tried everything for their health, what's one shift in how they think about their body or their health that would actually help them move forward?
I feel like that's a hard question. So they feel like they've tried everything in one shift that they,
Yeah.
um, well, I like I don't think it's going to be a hack, like a body hack or anything. It's going to be like some sort of mental shift and orientation to what you have going on. If you're feeling at a dead end and like you've tried everything, I promise you haven't tried everything. Um, and there's and I promise that there's ways of thinking about your health that you haven't considered. And so um, exploring those ways and what they might be, that's going to probably be the thing that gets you to the right practitioner that's going to help you, um, or even have an insight about, I mean, sometimes this stuff happens through counseling. Like sometimes people don't realize that they had trauma when they were a kid, and that addressing that trauma is what it is, but and they never thought of that, like they thought it was a physical thing. And so that's just opening up, to different mindsets about like what could really be going on here, and
Yeah.
what angle have I not thought about my health?
Yeah, absolutely. So shift from thinking that they've tried everything because they haven't, and to keep
Yeah,
exploring options. I love
yeah.
that. Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Experience Health podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow for more conversations. And if you want to connect with Dr. Blake or learn more about his work, you can find all of his information in the description below. To connect with the Experience Health podcast, you'll find the links in the description as well. Until next time, have a great week. Bye.